Hello everyone, welcome to Azura Psych, and if you're wondering about the new camera angle, I wanted to have a place over in this kind of area where I could put images and stuff up for this specific video, so that's why I'm over here instead of in the center. But other than that, today I've got a video for you that's a little bit more just kind of casual and fun compared to a lot of my other videos. Recently for Christmas, my grandmother bought me a Nintendo Switch, and I've been playing a lot of Pokemon Sword. And when I played through the game and beat the story, I thought to myself, it's funny how a lot of the Pokemon types in this game and some of these Pokemon reflect a lot of the MBTI types that we see studying personality typology. So I thought it might be fun to kind of relate the two and relate personality type to Pokemon type. I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get into it. So there's actually 18 Pokemon types compared to the 16 personality types. So not every single Pokemon type has a personality type associated to it, but I did my best to pick the Pokemon types that were the most fitting for each of the types in the MBTI system. That said, my plan is to just kind of go down the list of personality types and discuss the Pokemon type that I think is related to them. So starting off, let's start with the ESTP. So the ESTP is the type that leads with extroverted sensing in the MBTI system, and they have secondary introverted thinking. This leads to a personality type who's very straightforward, kind of go-get-it, able to interact with their environment in the now, in the moment. And for this personality type, I chose the Pokemon type, fighting. And this one might seem kind of straightforward, because when you think of an ESTP, you think of someone who, yeah, they might even occasionally get into some fights. They're the kind of people that you see in movies and TVs who aren't afraid to throw hands or, get into a fight with somebody when they need to. These types are very interactive. They're in the moment. They're able to calm themselves down sometimes when they need to and focus when it's the task at hand that's important to them. And that's something that related a lot to the fighting type in Pokemon. Where you see the fighting types in the Pokemon TV show and games, they're usually these Pokemon like, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, these kind of focused, driven people who are very interactive and in the moment. And that's something that I saw with the ESTP type as well. Next up is the ESTP's sibling type, the ESFP, who also leads with extroverted sensing. But instead of introverted thinking, they have secondary introverted feeling. So I always think of the ESTP as like the more technical, less emotional version of the ESFP. And the ESFP is usually a kind of more in-the-moment type of person who is driven by a personal passion in relation to like their desires and who they want to be as an individual. And for the ESFP personality type, there was no type that fit better, in my opinion, than the fire type. And when we think of ESFPs, we usually think of passion, we think of drive. When they want to do something, they're in the moment, they're very fiery about it, they're able to interact and just kind of go out and do what they want to do. They don't hesitate. That's the one thing about fire types and ESFPs that I've seen, is that they don't like to hesitate and they don't want to overthink things. So when they want something, they just kind of go out and they do their best to get it. And to me, that related a lot to the fire-type Pokemon. And you can see a lot of that even in just the newest Pokemon game where you have like Cinderace, which is this fire bunny kind of Pokemon who is very driven by passion and fire. And when you look at all the fire types across all the games and the starters, they all tend to have that one thing in common. And that's the passion, the driving fire that guides them into where they want to be and what they want to be doing. Next up is the ENTP. And the ENTP leads with extroverted intuition, and they have secondary introverted thinking. They're a lot like the ESTP type in that they're kind of this outgoing type who's very technical and they have a quick ability to grasp and understand new things. But the difference is that ENTPs tend to be a little bit more idea-driven as intuitive types. They're a little bit less in the moment. They're still one of the most kind of in the moment types because they interact with the now and how they can change the now in the moment, but they're not going to be the types who are reflexive and adaptive in the same way that an ESTP might be, who is going to be living directly in the moment. Anyway, for the ENTP type, I chose electric. I think electric is a great representation of extroverted intuition and introverted thinking paired together because it's something that's very quick. Its ability to interact with the outer world quickly is one thing that I see a lot with the electric type in the games and in the shows. This is something that we see with even just like Pikachu, for example, the ability to learn new things quickly and adapt to situations through ingenuity. And this is something that I would ascribe to the ENTP personality type, their ability to mentally adapt to new situations and overcome the situations and problems that they have by thinking of new and creative ways to do so. After that is the ENFPs. Now, ENFPs, much like ENTPs, lead with extroverted intuition and they have secondary introverted feeling, which makes them very similar to ESFPs. So they're going to be sharing that same kind of personal drive that the ESFPs have, but just like the ENTP, they're going to be more so kind of idea-driven. They're going to be driven by their ingenuity, their creativity, their ability to overcome situations through problem solving. So for the ENFP personality type, I chose Fairy. And Fairy is actually one of the newer Pokemon types, but when you look at fairies and you look at them in the Pokemon series, they're usually these kind of playful tricksters, and that's something that we can see with ENFPs as well. They're very creative in how they solve their problems, but they're not going to be as technical about it like you might see with the ENTP or even the ESTP. They're not trying to solve their problems through some, gigantic contraption or through some mathematical solution. They're going to be doing it in a way that reflects them as an individual and what they think is important, kind of force of personality, force of will through that introverted feeling function. And you see this with like Jigglypuff in the show. And Jigglypuff is the one who, when someone falls asleep, she draws all over their face and kind of, makes fun of them while they're sleeping. So when they wake up, they have no idea what happened. She sings them to sleep. And I think that this is a good representation of the ENFP personality type. We also see that adaptability in some of like the moves that they can learn throughout the series. Like Metronome is often a thing that is associated with Clefairy, another Pokemon type move, which allows them to just kind of pick a random move from the existence of Pokemon and use it. And I can see ENFPs being like this, where they're just like, all right, I'm going to pick something random and kind of just go with it and let it ride out and see if it works. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, oh well, I'll try something new. And that kind of reflexiveness and ability to adapt mentally is something that I associate with both the Fairy type and the ENFP personality type. Now we're switching gears a little bit to the ESFJ personality type. And the ESFJ leads with extroverted feeling, a function often associated with kind of social harmony and managing the emotional levels of the room and the people that they're with. And they have secondary introverted sensing, a function often associated with kind of homeostasis and making sure things are maintained in the way that they want them to be maintained, and then an appreciation for things that have already happened and the things in their life that are important to them. So the type that I chose for ESFJ is actually one that you might not have expected, but I chose normal. And I don't want people to think that that means I think ESFJs are boring because they got normal type, but I think that the normal type is a good representation of kind of the values that ESFJs have. They have that strong introverted sensing inside of them, and they want things to kind of be maintained in the way that they believe that they should be. They don't want to try a bunch of new things and try crazy new things throughout their life. They're usually content with their family, their friends, and the ones that are important to them, and they want to make sure that these people are okay. When I think of a normal type Pokemon, I think of something like Chansey or Blissey, the Pokemon that works in the Pokemon Center, and they work to heal and help others. There's other normal type Pokemon though, and there's a lot of them, and they represent a wide range of kind of personality. But the one thing that we see across the normal type Pokemon is that they're usually quite driven to do what they want to do within their specific field of interest. So if it's like the Chansey, they want to make sure that they're going to be helping people. But then again, the ESFJ is a personality type that is going to be slightly adaptable, but they're not going to be as adaptable compared to the EP types that we just talked about. They're going to be the types who more so, instead of adapting, they want to help through making sure things stay the way that they believe that they should be, and they're going to make sure that they can do everything they can to keep their friends, family, and those that are important to them happy and healthy. Next up, we have ENFJs, who also lead with extroverted feeling, but instead of secondary introverted sensing like the ESFJ, they have secondary introverted intuition. So what does this mean for this type, and what kind of type of person are they? This is the type of person who is going to be reliable, dependable, they want to help usually, they care about the social sphere that they're in, but they're also a little bit more future-focused and goal-focused on average than the average ESFJ. The ENFJ is usually someone who drives themselves and others to kind of achieve the things that they want to within their social sphere. They're the kind of person who's going to push a friend to do better. They're the kind of person who's going to push themselves to do better at times, but they also just want to make sure that everyone that they care about is doing what they believe that they think that they can reach within their potential. ENFJs often like bringing the potential out of other people, and I think that that is something that I think relates to the flying type in Pokemon. So when we think of flying types, we think of types who, much like the normal type, are very adaptable. They can kind of interact to new situations, but unlike the EPs that we talked about earlier, they're not overly adaptable. There's still some rigidness in there, and I think the flying types are a good representation of this because they're the types who they're able to soar up high above the ground and do things that other types can't do at certain times, but they're also types who are going to be very kind of focused on what they need to be doing. And this is the type of Pokemon that we see throughout the game and the show that we usually meet relatively early on, and they carry with us throughout our entire journey. If you go watch the shows and play the games, most people have at least one bird or flying type without them through their journey. And it's because there's usually something, relatively enjoyable or attractive about these types of people. And we see that they help us in a lot of different ways. You could say that as flying types, they kind of uplift us. They bring us into the air and allow us to explore new heights. Next up is the ESTJ personality type, and this type leads with extroverted thinking, and they have secondary introverted sensing. This is the kind of person who is extremely matter-of-fact. They care about logic and how they believe things should be based on their experiences. And this can lead to a type of person who's relatively hard-headed at times, but it is that same hard-headedness that gives them determination and strength when it comes to the things that they want to do. And for these reasons, I gave the ESTJ the rock type. The rock type is just that. They're rock solid. They're able to kind of keep their ground. They're not worried about what other people think about them. They're going to do what they're going to do despite what anyone thinks or what anyone is going to do to try and get in their way. And that's something that I think is admirable about the ESTJ type and the rock type. But the one thing that we'll see here and the friction that we often see with these two types is that they're usually going to butt heads with other people or even people who are similar to them. Rock types can be quick to get into fights, quick to get into arguments, and the same can be said with ESTJs. When an ESTJ wants something their way, they're going to push with all of their might to try and get it done their way. They're very matter-of-fact, and that's why I think that ESTJ is a good match with the rock type Pokemon type. Next up, we have ENTJs, and ENTJs also lead with extroverted thinking, but they have secondary introverted intuition. This leads to a type who is going to be very matter-of-fact as well, but they're usually a little bit more future-focused and a little bit less stuck in the details compared to the ESTJs. They're very determined, and I think determination is one of the things that we see the most with ENTJs, and one of the driving personality factors, as they're extremely hard-headed and competitive when it comes to achieving what they want out of life. And the Pokemon type that I'm giving to them is actually one that I wish I could have taken for the INTJs because it's my personal favorite Pokemon type, but I think it much better fits this type than the INTJ, and that's going to be the Dragon Pokemon type. Now, a lot of you may have seen this coming. Dragons are the types who are just sheer forces of will, sheer forces of personality, extremely stubborn, determined. When you look at Pokemon like Bagon and you read their Pokedex entry, they essentially because they want to fly, they just keep jumping off cliffs until they finally evolve and develop wings as one of their older evolutions. They are so stubborn that they'll just keep trying and doing what they're going to do over and over and over again until they get what they want out of life. They're extremely competitive. They're types who tend to reach the highest heights when it comes to skill, determination, strength. And I think that's something we tend to see with ENTJs. And if you notice, this is why ENTJs tend to end up in higher end like work positions. They're the most likely type to be like a CEO or someone who's a manager in a corporation. And this is not because they're inherently better than any other type, person, or Pokemon. It's because they as individuals value these types of accomplishments. They're accomplishment driven. They are competitive. And that's something that drives the ENTJ much like a dragon. Just want to briefly interrupt the video to say that if you're enjoying this video, please let me know down in the comment section below, but also consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon is the way that I, as a content creator, kind of stay afloat because YouTube is extremely volatile when it comes to AdSense and whether or not a video is going to make any decent amount of money to allow me to get by as a content creator. If 5% of my subscribers supported me for $1 on Patreon, I would be able to continue safely doing this as a living while I continue my education. So if you'd like to support me as a content creator, consider just supporting even $1 on my Patreon, and I will have the link to that down in the description box below. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the video. Now we're moving on to the introverted types, and the first introverted type we're going to talk about is the ISFPs. And the ISFPs lead with introverted feeling, and they have secondary extroverted sensing. Much like the ESFP, this is going to be a type who cares a lot about that introverted feeling function, but even more so than the ESFP, they're going to make sure that they're authentically expressing themselves all the time, but they're not going to be doing it in a way that's kind of as active, fluid, or adaptive as maybe the ESFP. This is a type who's more selective in how they interact with things, but they're also going to be making sure that when they are doing the things that they believe they should be doing, they're going to be perfectly authentic all the way through. So the type that I chose for ISFP is grass. And a lot of the grass types we see in the shows and the games are types who are very much focused on that kind of authenticity. When you look at all the grass starters, they can be kind of, prudes at times. They can be a little bit snivy. They're going to be the types who are going to be focused on who they are as individuals, and they don't care what other people think about them. But at the same time, they have this other side of their personality that can be presented. They can be happy, they can be cheerful. It's whoever that they want to be as an individual, as long as they're expressing that, they're usually pretty happy. They're going to be extremely authentic at everything that they do, and for them it's important to make sure that they maintain that authenticity, whether it means they're going to be a jerk, whether it means they're going to be someone who's happy, cheerful, outgoing, supportive to others. There's really can be a huge wide spectrum of the ways that ISFP can present themselves, and that's something we see a lot of in the grass-type Pokemon in these shows and games. Next up is the INFPs, who also lead with introverted feeling, but they have secondary extroverted intuition. This leads to a type who is going to be a little bit more ingenious and maybe even playful when it comes to how they're presenting their personality and their authenticity. And I gave the INFPs the ghost type, and actually the ghost type I think is tied for favorite with my with dragons for me. I really like the ghost type, and I think a lot of the ghost Pokemon are really cool, but I think the INFPs deserve this. So INFPs and ghosts, I think there's a reason that Gengar looks like a shadow of Clefairy or Clefable, I can't remember which one is which, but I think there's a reason that Gengar looks like a shadow of this Pokemon. It's because much like the fairy types, INFPs and ghost types are often very much tricksters, but they're more so tricksters who hide in the shadow. They're kind of playful, they're introverted, they don't want to be interacting with too many people, they wait for the right moment to kind of jump out and get people, but they're also going to be extremely authentic in this process. They don't care if they're spooking people or they're doing things a little bit weird or presenting themselves in their own weird way. They're going to wear what they want to wear, they're going to look like how they want to look like, and they're not going to care what other people think in the process. And if other people don't like that, that's fine. They can go ahead and just leave. I think INFPs are great representations of the ghost type. And if you look at some of the ghosts, some of them are pretty shy. You know, we expect a lot of the ghost types in the show, like Gengar and Haunter, to be these tricksters, but occasionally we get ones like Mimikyu, who, you know, just kind of lonely at times. Sometimes they want a friend, sometimes they just want to reach out, interact with other people, but they can scare people away sometimes because of their introverted and often eccentric nature. And this is something that I think goes well with the INFP personality type. I think the INFP personality type is a great match for the ghost types. Now we move on to the ISTP, who leads with introverted thinking and they have secondary extroverted sensing. This is the type of person who's going to be extremely technical, driven by knowledge. They want to learn all the things that they can learn. They may not be the fastest when it comes to approaching new topics or learning new things, but they're going to have really deep understandings of the few things that they usually dedicate themselves to. So the type that I gave ISTPs is bug types, and this one might seem a little weird at first, but when you think of bugs and you think about them throughout the Pokemon series, they're a very technical Pokemon type. Almost all of the moves that they have and the things that they do are kind of planned. They're things that require a lot of thought and process behind them. Unlike fire, which can just throw out flamethrower, you know, bug types have these moves like U-turn, where they can hit someone and then retreat out tactically. This is something that I think is a great representation of the ISTP type, as they're the types of people who gain these deep understandings of the systems that they're interacting with and try to really internalize all the knowledge that they have. And when they win, they want it to be because they understand the internal system of the thing that they're interacting with better than the people that they're working against. So I think that ISTPs have this trait about them. Another thing that I think relates to the bug type with the ISTP is their kind of slowness to evolve. A lot of the bug types really start out as these little weak Pokemon, but you get them through one or two stages of evolution and they turn into, you know, Beedrills. They turn into these other Pokemon who have a lot of potential compared to some of the other Pokemon out there who maybe have one or two evolutions, but they're a lot faster and they don't go through as much change because they don't have as much work to go through that change. You know, when you think of the Pokemon who go into the little shells when they evolve, you know, the ones who have to harden, then the Metapods, Pokemon like Metapod, they have to go into this stage where they're kind of vulnerable. While they're understanding the system and interacting with it in their new way, they're trying to internalize and synthesize all this information. They put themselves in this vulnerable state where they're not easily able to kind of protect themselves, but they get through to the other side and they turn into something that has a lot of potential. And that's something that I see with the ISTP personality type. Next up is the INTP, who leads with introverted thinking as well, but they have secondary extroverted intuition. And again, this is going to lead them to be a very technical type, but they want to be a little bit more creative and they want to have a little bit more creative exploration in how they approach their problem solving and how they deal with situations. They're not going to be as matter-of-fact and physically technical as they are in the kind of idea realm. They're very technical when it comes to exploring new thoughts and processes within the realm of ideas. So what type did I give to INTPs? I gave them Poison. And I think Poison is a type that, much like Bug type, is extremely technical. They have a lot of long-term kind of ways about dealing with things. They're going to win like it's a numbers game. When you're dealing with a poison type, they're going to lower your resistances because they understand the system. They're going to poison you. They're going to make sure that you're hurting over time. This is not a brute force type of Pokemon type. This is not a brute force type of personality type. The INTP is the type who's going to win by numbers, by their understanding of the system. And I think INTPs are actually the type of people who are usually good at Pokemon because the Pokemon games are math, essentially. Like once you get to the higher levels, it's just straight an understanding of numbers. You can guarantee who's going to win 90% of the time. But I think that INTPs are a great representation of the very technical nature of poison. They're going to lower your resistances. They're going to take you down slowly over time. They're going to really understand the system that they're interacting with. And to me, that represents, much like the bug type, the true understanding that this introverted thinking function has for the systems that they're interacting with. Next up is the ISTJ personality type. They lead with introverted sensing and they have secondary extroverted thinking. So much like the ESTJ personality type, they can be a little bit hard-headed in how they approach things. They want things to be done the way that they want to be done, and they're going to do their best to kind of enforce this. Unlike the ESTJ, though, ISTJs are usually a little bit less aggressive. They're going to just make sure that things are the way that they should be going, but they're not going to push too hard on others about it. They're going to make sure that they do it by doing everything that they can as an individual to upkeep and maintain the way that things should be going. So for this reason, I gave the ISTJ personality type the Steel type. And the Steel type of Pokemon are ones who are extremely reliable, they're dependent, they're not as outgoing or aggressive as maybe you might find with the Rock types, but they're the types who are very classy and able to get things done when they need to be done. They're extremely reliable. And when it comes to flashiness, Steel types and ISTJs aren't going to be the flashiest. They're not going to be the types of people who are shooting out grand, spectacular moves all the time. They're not going to have these bright colors on them. They're not going to be extremely spectacular, but they're going to have these kind of dull colors, but they're going to have this professionalism about them. Think of Champion Steven from the Hoenn region. This is someone who I think of when I think of this professionalism of the Steel types and maybe even the ISTJ. This is the type of person who is able to get things done in the way that they believe that they should be done in their professional manner. They're going to maintain what they want to maintain and uphold the values that are important to them. And they're not going to do it by pretending to be someone that they're not. They have that FI authenticity lower in the stack, so it is important to them, but they're not going to be overly flashy about this. They're going to do what they need to do and make sure it's done in a way that is kind of timely and professional and in a way that reflects what is important to them. Now it's time for the ISFJ. Now the ISFJ also leads with introverted sensing, but they have secondary extroverted feeling. ISFJs are often known for their kind of ability and desire to help others on maybe this more small scale compared to like the ESFJ, who I gave normal type, like Chansey and Blissey, who wants to kind of go out and help the world as much as they can. ISFJs are maybe this more small-term personal type of healing individual. They like to make sure that the people who are within their immediate social circle, usually a family or friend group, and not much more than that, are happy, healthy, and doing the best that they can be doing. So for this reason, I gave the ISFJ personality type the Water type. And Water is a Pokemon type who can do some of that healing a little bit every now and then. They have some moves who are there for support, but they can also be a type who's very fluid and able to go with the flow. And as a perceiving leading type, I think ISFJs have this kind of attribute about them. They're often willing to kind of just go with what needs to be done when it is them interacting with their friends and family. They're very adaptable to the needs and desires of others as long as they're able to upkeep what they want from that relationship. As long as they're not going to be sacrificing of themselves, they're usually pretty happy to adapt to other people's needs and desires. And this is something that I think is important about this type. And Water is something that is very adaptable. It fits the mold of whatever it needs to be. And that's something that I think ISFJs can do really well as long as they're in a healthy mind state. Next up, we have the INTJ, and this type leads with introverted intuition and they have secondary extroverted thinking. So this is the type of person who's going to be usually very future and goal focused. They're usually very determined to achieve the singular kind of thing that they want in life, and they're going to do everything within their individual power to achieve this type of thing. INTJs are also known for being extremely introverted, usually seen as the most introverted of all the personality types. They're often quite eccentric. But unlike INFPs or other types who maybe lead with introverted feeling, the eccentricity of an INTJ is going to be something that usually doesn't stand out too much. They're not expressively eccentric, they're just kind of odd in their actions and behaviors and the way in which they go about doing things. For these reasons, I gave the INTJ personality type the Dark Pokemon type. And a lot of you may have seen this coming, and INTJs are often kind of known for being edgy boys. You know, they wear a lot of black. They're usually villains in TVs and TV shows and movies, that type of thing. So I think that the dark type is something that represents a lot of the core elements of what the INTJ represents. They're usually these loner types. They're usually a bit eccentric. A lot of people may see them as evil, but a lot of the time they may just be misrepresented or misunderstood. And I think that that's something that really aligns well with both the dark type and the INTJ type. A lot of INTJs aren't going to be actually people who are bad. Most often they want to do well for people. They have that introverted feeling down in their lower function stack. They want to make sure that they're helping the people that they can and doing what they can to maintain those personal relationships with people who are important to them, but they're not the best at social kind of interaction, and they're usually not very good at kind of expressing their emotions, and I think this is something we see with the dark type. Now, the dark type is, I will admit, it's a type that I like. It's not my favorite, though. I said earlier, dragon type is my favorite. I don't want any of you to think that I gave INTJs dark because it's like my favorite type or anything. I did my best to represent each personality type with their personality type that matched it best. So while I do like dark, it is certainly not my favorite, but I do think that it is the best representation for the INTJ personality type. Last but not least, we have the INFJ personality type. INFJs lead with introverted intuition and they have secondary extroverted feeling. This leads to a personality type who is very future-focused, much like the INTJ, but they're not going to be the type of person who filters all of their intuitive thoughts through some sort of thinking function. Not everything has to make perfect logical sense. They're usually going to be able to instead see the emotional states of others and understand how those are going to progress over time and change with their actions and what they do to interact with those people. So for this reason, I gave INFJs the psychic type, and I think a lot of you may have seen this coming, but I think that the INFJ is the type who's very good at reading other people's emotional states and seeing how those might unfold over time through their intuition and their intuitive function. And I think that the INFJ personality type is also one who is quite introverted, maybe a little bit eccentric. They're not going to be the ones who are extremely expressive in their thoughts and actions. They're determined when they want to be, especially when it comes to interacting with other people in a way that's meaningful to them. But they're also going to be, again, very good at reading and understanding other people. And if they go down a dark path, sometimes even manipulating other people, which is something we see with the psychic types in Pokemon, who are able to kind of control the minds of those that they interact with if they go down some sort of dark path. So I think INFJs are a great match for the psychic personality type as people who are able to kind of see how emotional states and emotions in general are going to unfold over time, and they know how to meaningfully interact with and sometimes change those emotional states. All right, that's all 16 personality types. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion of why I think certain personality types relate to Pokemon types. And I just want you to remember that this is just opinion. I'm not saying for fact that these are these ones and that this one's that one. It's just my opinion of which Pokemon types match well with certain personality types. If you're curious about the two Pokemon types that I didn't use in this video, it was Ground and Ice. And I considered giving Ice to ESFJ because I gave ISFJ water, but I thought that the normal type and the Pokemon within the normal type were a better representation of the ESFJ type, considering their desires and wants. But if you're an ESFJ out there and you were disappointed by the normal typing, then consider Ice the other type that I would have given to the ESFJ type, and you can take Ice home and let it be yours as well. Ground, I didn't really have ascribed to any personality type, maybe the STJs, but I thought that Rock and Steel better represented them. But if you enjoyed this video, please let me know down in the comment section below. This was something that I thought was really interesting. As someone who's a gamer, I play a lot of video games. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. And I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurapsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura at Asura Psych. Have a good one.